You see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Okay, back on June 23rd, we had the superintendent of the Quaker Valley School District talk about why they should build this high school up on that hill. Today, we're going to have the other side of the story. We have some folks from what loosely termed Plan B that's going to talk about some of the problems of that building site and maybe an alternative to giving Quaker Valley a new high school. So I'm going to let them run with it real quick. So they got a lot of material to cover. Please ask questions. I've got a couple announcements. Number one, I'm kind of looking for a volunteer to serve as an assistant to help me run down some of these speakers. So if anybody wants to get involved with that, I'd love to have your help. The second thing is, for our recordings, we're finding out that if you don't ask your question with a microphone, it doesn't get recorded. It's very difficult to pick up just an area mic. So today when we get into the question and answer period, if you'd raise your hand, there'll be 2 mics going around. We'll try and get to you so you can ask your questions, okay? Other than that, we're ready to go. This is Miss Kim Gatesman. She's going to give the presentation on the Plan B for the new high school.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And obviously this new high school is something we all need. Nobody disagrees with that concept. But where it's gone a little wonky, you have to kind of go back in history just a little bit. So 2010, if you look at the diagram, it has the site plan of your school, and then there's this red building on it. Eccles created a plan of 172,000 square foot plan with a garage underneath at 622 Beaver. So this Plan B has been around for 13 years. It's not like something made out of the thin air. There are actual architects and experts behind that. So we proceeded in that plan, bought some homes, sold some homes, lost some money, whatever. Eventually, we somehow determined that we now need a 222,000 square foot school on Beaver. Why, I'm not sure, and haven't found through any right to knows exactly why we need something that big we only have 584 students. But that particular size was the sole determinant of eliminating Beaver as an option. When you have something that big on that parcel, but it's now been downsized. It was originally downsized to 170, then it's been 167, and the current high school is now down to 162 that is proposed on Camp Meeting Road. Now that's only about 30,000 square feet bigger than what we have. So given that our setbacks are already really far back, you can easily get that 30,000 on the current one. But if you're looking for 222,000 square feet, you can do it, it's just really tall. So Up through 2015, the plan through all the meeting minutes was always to build on Beaver, partly because it's in our community, we have all the amenities, our stadiums, et cetera. And something eventually happened in 2017. The parcel up on Camp Meeting Road wasn't gonna work for the current owner, and somehow we decided, which I'm not sure how we decided, that's not in any right to know I can find, but we decided to start looking at that one. And even our Quaker Valley's own engineers, Garvin Bauer Byko, essentially said, even if it's donated, you might not want it. You need to better assess the cost of this particular site. It's not that it's not lovely up there, because it truly is. It's got a great view, it's pretty. But it's not designed for the amount of site work that needs to be done to get that pad ready for a school, a practice facility, some tennis courts, some parking, all that kind of stuff. So at that point, though, we hired Michael Baker International to give us some conceptual drawings, and you can hand those guys out. And they came up with some different site plans of things that you could maybe put up there. They had, at that time, we wanted a bigger site. We wanted at least 40 acres of flat plateau. So the numbers will be a little off because we've shrunk down to about 22 to 27 acres on that top after disturbing 50 acres. But you'll get the gist when you see it. So they came up with conceptual site plans, and in their proposal, they specifically said there had to be an emergency-only road off of one other road that didn't come off of Camp Meeting Road. So all of their plans, and they constructed 3, have an emergency-only road that comes off Little Sewickley Creek. They also note that the Quaker Valley's traffic engineer says that they can come off Camp Meeting Road. However, Michael Baker is one of the top 3, maybe the number 1 in Pittsburgh, and they went with the safest option. Now, if you go with the safest option here, because we have Pittsburgh red bed soils on that site, and it's pretty much everywhere. But in order to make it sure that it won't slide whatsoever, the safest option is to haul away 1.6 million cubic yards of soil. Now, that's not an insignificant number, and at first, I thought it was a joke. Well, not the number of that, but the total cost. Because initially I was trying to get the report that came from Michael Baker that says exactly, we know that they don't recommend doing it. We have plenty of engineers who've said it because it's cost prohibitive. But it would have explained it in plain English. But when you look at that site and the amount of cubic yards, it's actually telling inside the conceptual site plan, the 1.6 million. So back when they made this site, gas prices were a lot lower, but currently it would be about $200 a cubic yard to dispose of. They didn't say move it around the site. They said remove it from the site and dispose of it elsewhere. So let's just say it was half price. Let's say it's $100 back in 2017. That's still $160 million just to move the dirt. That doesn't mean there's any of our road construction. And if anybody was at the landslide presentation by Representative Kinkead and Gatos, Allegheny Public Works, for every 100 feet that you're working on a road that is in slide-prone material that they either need to remediate or had a landslide, for every 100 feet, it's $1 million. And if you look at the roads that we're constructing on Camp Meeting Road, the new one, which some slopes, and when this is done, you can come over and look at my prints and, scribble on all of your things. Some of the slopes are north of 70 degrees. And these soils should never be above 40%, absolutely never. And once you're above 25%, there's a lot of more due diligence. A geotech has to sign off on it. Most times you're gonna have a lot of retaining walls if you wanna build on over 25% slopes. So essentially this thing was told it was cost prohibitive. So then eventually we go from Michael Baker, we go to PJ Dick, another top firm in Pittsburgh, well qualified, And we keep going down in the level of quality of our engineers to what appears to be shopping for engineers, to get somebody who actually says whatever the district wants to be out there. So they came up with a blended plan. So we're going to take this, while that soil is fascinating, I built on a site that had red bed clays. It is the most terrifying thing if you're a developer to have this on your site. It's kind of fun if you just wanted to play with it, but as soon as you disturb it, have any pressure on it whatsoever, the water, it just slides like plates, even though it's clay. It's fascinating, but we don't really want to be messing around with that. So we keep going down, and different types of engineers to get to one that will say what they wanted them to say in the LEET zoning hearing board. But we'll back up just a smidge into 2019. There you go. Our teachers, we didn't have a lot of room in our budget. So for things like going to brain spaces, designing this 222,000 square foot school, or even the early geotechnical work, or even the legal fees for getting a special exemption for this to be zoned as a legal zoning thing. So our teachers in 2019 took approximately a 50% decrease in the raises that they normally would receive in their 4-year contract. So over the course of his past contract, which ended in June of 30th of this year, they gave our school district about $3 million into that budget from raises that they didn't receive. Now, we use that for anything, like attorney fees. We used it from engineering, a lot of design work with brain spaces. We've even used it for marketing and research. So what happened in 2018 is they realized people wouldn't support necessarily a referendum. It was a little below 50%. They thought if they educated us enough, used the right words, like building in a floodplain, we could get it a little higher. But that's where all of our marketing comes in. We're all getting these lovely flyers. We normally spend about 120 to 200 outside people per year the last few years in experts to do that. And we hired 2 additional marketing folks in Quaker Valley to make sure that we all know how well this is being run. But as far as I'm concerned, we're a public school, so you shouldn't really have to market to us. And all of that should be going to either our teachers or our students or some other programming. So this site has some land. It's also on Edgeworth. And our administration in December of 2019 made a presentation to Edgeworth Borough Council. Now, if you ever get a chance, and I can send links to anybody, reading those meeting minutes are quite entertaining because the Borough Council is pretty knowledgeable. They have a guy from FedEx who develops all the new sites for FedEx and pretty much grilled on Draco, Anteline, and Mr. Gauthier when they did their presentation. And, oh, well, don't worry about it. And essentially, when they got done with that, there was supposed to be some buildings, some parking, a bunch of things on the Edgeworth portion. But in Edgeworth, that's a conservation overlay district. And that's what I have in my backyard, too. It's got red bed soils. You don't build on it. You basically avoid it at all possible costs. You are allowed, however, to put an emergency-only road, that kind of stuff in there. So this is all going on. They eventually redesigned the site simply to eliminate the Edgeworth portion. And then we have to start shrinking the site because we can't afford the site at 40 and 50 acres plateaus, so we get it down and down. Now, but we don't have our zoning yet. So we have to find someone who will say that this is a good idea. And we did. We got John Thomas. He's currently our project manager, but at the time he was hired to be the expert testimony at Leet Zoning Hearing Board, and he essentially said that putting a school here would be fine. And I think that a small primary school might not have been bad. You wouldn't have had to disturb anything up there. You could put a small primary school, there'd be enough room, but a high school is kind of different. And so we get through the zoning hearing board, and they waited for the application until March of 2021, when we'd already owned the land for over 3 years. We had been supposedly doing due diligence for four years, since 2017. And a bunch of us had gone to the Leet Zoning Hearing Board meetings. They went on for a very long time. Pretty much everybody got to speak. But at the very end of this, Quaker Valley was given a very unusual ruling. I've never seen it before in a zoning one. You normally are either denied straight out, approved straight up, or approved with exception, with conditions to your approval. Instead, this one was, we'll give you 30 days to come back and do the stuff we want you to do, which is an emergency-only road, and indemnifying all the downslope neighbors, like a very serious insurance policy. So instead of that, they chose to not do that, have it be denied, and obviously we're in the lawsuit portion. But some of the things that the Leet Township Zoning Hearing Board, in their findings of facts of why they eventually had to deny it because Quaker Valley wouldn't come back, were that the current high school has 2 roads serving it, Ohio River Boulevard and Beaver Street, which are available to first responders. There's an ever-present risk of active school shooters using automatic weapons. First responder delays of minutes or seconds in reaching the school can cost students and faculty members their lives. It's about a mile farther from all of our first responders. No first responders or emergency management experts testified. The traffic expert said he didn't consult with any of those and has no idea how they would handle the emergency access if one of the parts of the roads were closed. He testified that first responders will figure out a way to manage it, and he's not concerned that they will be able to reach the school shooter sooner or later. He testified that a simple emergency-only road could be accomplished, and it might involve eminent domain. Based on the traffic engineer's testimony, Mr. Thomas's testimony, and the objector's testimony to the emergency-only road issue, the zoning hearing board determined it's an abnormal risk for a school not to implement an emergency management plan that includes an emergency-only road if reasonably recommended by the first responders, of which we have a whole letter from Leet recommending an emergency-only road. If a public school's emergency management plan does not include an emergency-only road reasonably recommended by first responders, the risk to public safety and welfare will be substantial, serious, highly probable, and virtually certain, and will be abnormal for a school. So that's what came out of the Leet Zoning Hearing Board's recommendations, which seems like we should be following safety and science, but we didn't. We appealed, and that's currently where it's at. Nobody knows. I mean, I think it's a couple more months before a verdict is reached on whether that zoning is even going to be applicable. But now we're on to the site plan. So the site plan finally was submitted. It was submitted without any geotechnical report, which is kind of fascinating because it's kind of hard to design roads, grade anything, without a geotechnical report, because they're the ones who are going to have to sign off on that. There's, at the end, when you get a chance, you should come up and look at the different portions of the site, because there's a lot of one-to-one slopes, which would be a 45-degree angle. On this particular type of soil, you shouldn't go above a 2-to-1. I built on the same type of soil in Ohio Township, and our ordinance was 1.5 to 1 at the time. And once it went to Planning Commission, they saw the soils report and said it has to be 2 to 1. So it couldn't be the same slope. So even though there's not an ordinance, Planning Commission can always go in favor of a safer option. But now, and I didn't really get involved in this too much until about 2000, well, maybe late 2020, 2021, when I started reading the documents, because everybody said it all would have been researched. But the thing about those documents are, anything that's negative is not on that website. You have to file a right to know. There's a handy dandy, I got some stuff put on there, but you have to know it's hiding under certain little buttons. And there's a whole lot of stuff that is just not out there at all whatsoever. So we have spent, like this year, we added a lobbying firm, which is always kind of interesting. Why do we need a lobbying firm? We spend $120,000 now to Buchanan Ingersoll, and supposedly for grant writing. But what it is to try to find money for this school. Because originally they were planning on PlanCon, which hadn't been funded since 2018-19, and all the experts said that it probably wasn't going to have funding again. So they're trying to replace that. They've come up with things like you could apply for Pennsylvania Greenways, Trails, and Recreational Program grants, or the Pennsylvania Multimodal Transportation Fund grant. Now that one's pretty funny, because that one, they want to add like a bus stop, when we already have a bus stop and all sorts of transportation where we're currently located. And most of our marketing is designed to try to keep us in the dark. So if there's a meeting about the school, when we had the landslide presentation, you cannot get you cannot get insurance in the state of Pennsylvania for a landslide. So Representative Kinkead and Representative Gatos, it's a bipartisan effort, are trying to start a landslide insurance. It will go under the mine subsidence insurance, and you wouldn't get the full value of your house. You'd maybe get like $250,000, but it would at least be something to get you past, and regroup and move on with your life. There were people, but when that particular event was going to go on, September 20th, Quaker Valley also scheduled the meeting to just talk about the high school. So anytime that there's something else people could go listen to, we schedule an event. Whether it's Leap Planning Commission, we schedule, Act 34. Or we like to put them on at the same time, so people can't go to both. But at that landslide event, Mayor Carrier of Glen Osborne, she's been working diligently to get the zoning changed in Aleppo. So Aleppo, Sewickley Heights, and Sewickley and Glen Osborne work as kind of a council of governments when they're doing their zoning. So they have comprehensive zoning. And to do the steep slope ordinances and what has to be done whenever you're dealing with Pittsburgh red beds. So she's on the forefront as far as getting that. It would match a little more like Edgeworth, or Franklin Park is pretty much a great example of what things should look like when you're dealing with Pittsburgh red beds. They're very specific on what you have to do if you want to be building on them and how much you can build. So she really got into this, and she's been on their council for probably 15 to 20 years, either as council or as the mayor, because she had had a couple different landslides in Glen Osborne. One of them was a house for a young family, and it just slid. The landslide went through the kitchen. The house could not be repaired. It was their first home. They went bankrupt and had to default on their mortgage. So she's very passionate and has studied this a lot. Representative Kinkead never thought they were actually going to have to learn about landslides, red bed clay, all sorts of things. But that is a valuable piece of legislation. Now, if and when it gets passed. But it doesn't cover man-made hazards. So if a developer of any kind causes this, that particular insurance wouldn't cover anybody, which is why it's so important to insure our downslope neighbors if we would build on Camp Meeting Road. Unlike the current location, the worst thing we would do is there isn't any red beds on our Beaver site. It has its own particular challenges. We have like a coal seam, some water, but you can mitigate with those with a caissons. Our school's been standing for almost 100 years. But there aren't any red beds. But even if there were red beds, at most we're gonna cover the tennis courts. We're not gonna do too much of that. But essentially, by focusing on the high school and neglecting basic education goals and our teachers, where we're at now is we just focus on this so much that our costs are, well, they're crazy per student. $32,185 per student. And we didn't do so well in our Keystones last cycle. We were 24th in the region, 192nd in the state, which is about the 30th, top 30th. Like, they're 70% worse than us. Our elementaries and our middle school are fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And we always were in our high school. But what's changed is we seem to only focus about this high school. We can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So at this point, I'm gonna kind of give this over to our resident more soils expert. Gravity doesn't really care that we want a new high school located on a red bed clay site. It doesn't care that we're opposed to doing extra safety measures. It's gonna do whatever it's gonna do. It may slide, it may not slide, but at the very least, we should be doing the appropriate safety measures so that everybody's protected. And number two, if it did slide, I mean, their own John Thomas said it's gonna stay on the site, which is kind of hilarious because I don't know how you can control a landslide. But even if it did, that's the part of Camp Meeting Road. We have Encompass Health, we have a lot of people who go up and down there. How are these people gonna remediate this landslide? We might not have Camp Meeting Road around to either get to the school. So you still need some other way to get there. And now I'll give it to Lynn, who knows tons and tons and tons about soils. Here it is.
Hi, my name is Lynn Trusky. Is this on? Yes, okay. Full disclosure. Okay. I work for Michael Baker Engineering, but I'm not representing myself as a professional right now. But about in 2017, my husband brought me the news that they were going to purchase this site. And just by chance, I was in my office, and the guy down the hall had the soils report. And I was unlucky enough to read it and sort of get the answers to the test long before the rest of us it's sort of been unraveling over the years. But what that soils report says is that there is a massive amount of red bed clay on that site. So they did all the borings, they did the report, and red bed clay is highly volatile. They call it highly reactive. And it's not an engineerable soil, so you have to remove it from the site. That's extremely expensive, and Kim mentioned there are three options. There's high risk, medium risk, and low risk options. So the high risk option is a balanced site, and that is what the district is proposing, at least in the panel discussion that they had. What date was that? In case you all didn't go to that. Okay. On September 20th, the district soils engineer mentioned two very horrifying concepts. One is a balanced site where they're going to take the highly reactive soil and mix it in with the normal soil and hope it all works out, right? And then the second concept that they mentioned, which it was just unbelievable, they talk about blasting. The reason why they're blasting is it's cost prohibitive to go in there like in the medieval times with your chisel and chisel that out, right? So both of those things are cost prohibitive. If you do the math on $200 per cubic yard times 1.65 million, I think you're at $330 million. We're at $30 million for the site costs in totality. And that includes engineering the Camp Meeting Road, where that's red bed clay along Camp Meeting Road. I estimated Camp Meeting Road to be improved at $35 million. So I think the $30 million needs to be increased to another $35 million just to deal with the Camp Meeting Road improvements. And then on top of that, they're talking about a balanced site. I don't believe this site can be a balanced site. I do believe there's some happy medium between exporting 1.65 million cubic yards off-site versus none, okay? But the reason why they're doing this is because it's gonna blow the budget. The budget is an artificial number that they're doing so that we don't have a referendum, okay? It's a cumulative process where you would go and you would design a safe site. And if that included an access road, that include exporting soils, whatever it would take to make that site safe, you would price it out, you would tell the public what the number is, and if you had a referendum, so be it. But that's not how they're doing it. They're doing it the opposite. They have a fictitious number, they're gonna start the construction, and they're gonna tell you what the price tag is later. We're just gonna wing it, right? So, like I said, I have a job, full-time job, I'm very busy. But the more I looked into this site, the more I became obsessed because I couldn't believe that a public school district could actually get us, Lee Township, into this kind of trouble. As I started unfolding who would be the adult in the room, okay? I went to the Department of Education. They said, we don't control the site. I went to not the district attorney, what's the Auditor General. I went to the Auditor General and I said, you have a junior varsity group of people trying to develop a red bay clay site. The collective expertise of that board, I would not let them put a deck on the back of my yard, in the back of my house. But they're trying to go and develop something that PJ Dick backed away from. And then Michael Baker backed away from. And they also had the audacity to redact the GER report so that we can't get it. So I read that report, but unfortunately you all can't see that report. Nobody can, but the school district has it. Okay, so.
Lynn, who paid for that report?
The district. So that's the awkward
How did
piece.
the district get money to pay for that report?
The taxpayers, right.
Thank you.
I mean, we've had discussions even with Harrisburg, and they said, we're due that report. But Kim requested it when, August, or was it March?
August was the first time, October, beginning of October was the second time.
Okay. So, but in the meantime, there's some safety checks here where Lee Township now has to be, like I said, the adult in the room. So they have an engineering firm that's employed, by Lee Township, and I think it's Solaray.
Smith, Solaray.
Okay. All right. So, there's some safety checks there, but in the end, they're still proposing this balanced site. And until that actually gets submitted, we don't really know what's in their soils report. Interestingly, when they submitted their plan to the township, they just submitted the plan, but they omitted their soils report, okay? Very suspicious. You never would submit a plan without a soils report because you have slopes on here that far exceed normal soils, like a 1-to-1, and you have colluvial soil. You can't do a 1-to-1. So why are they doing that? Because they cannot afford the retaining walls that they need on this site. Also, triggers a referendum. So I guess in summary, what I'm trying to say is they have systematically eliminated all the safety factors that you would need to address this red bed clay soil, plus the access problems they have with the site. They're doing that to avoid a referendum. So much so that they decided to sue us. Who would sue a township? What they did is we had this, I don't even know how many days of testimony we had in the zoning. 9 months of testimony of how unsafe this site is, okay? It's the will of Lee Township. We're ultimately holding the bag. If something happens on that site, we get sued twice. Once as the district and once as the township. So what they do, instead of saying, yeah, we're all for safety, let's put the access road in, let's export the bad soils, et cetera, they choose not to do that. Let's have downside insurance. The insurance alone, I talked to 2 different firms that do this type of insurance. It's Marsh and Chubb. Both of them said that the insurance alone is cost prohibitive. It would be, because they said, quote unquote, we're in the business of making money. One of these projects, we would have to insure you the total project cost. The premium would be, if it's $105 million project cost, the premium is $105 million plus some kind of, contingency for other types of litigation. So that's why the district sued us, because that's the poison pill of the site. The other problem is that one of the guys said he wouldn't even insure the site. So what you've done by not having the insurance involved is you removed the experts, the actuaries and all the soils engineers, you removed them. They have some guy working out of his truck who actually said at the panel meeting, somebody asked, some of the Leesdale people said, "Where's our insurance?" He said, "Good engineering is your insurance." That is preposterous. I've never heard, that's sort of like, let's have the mafia do a self-audit. That is who the insurance is against. It's the professional liability and everything else. So you can tell I get worked up about this, but this has been going on since 2017, and they are wasting our tax dollars. I don't believe this site can be developed. I really don't, because I think our max is like 120 million, right? Right, Bill?
About 125,
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'm clocking in at like 75 million is missing from the budget that they're telling the public. 75 million. And the district, or I think in Draco, I didn't hear her say this herself, but Kim, you said, somebody heard her say, we're going to start the construction, and if we have to go back for a referendum, that's what we're going to do. The thing is I don't like is, don't lie to the taxpayer. If you want to come in at 170 million and you all agree that we should do a school for 170 million, then have at it, right? But don't lie to them and say it's 105 million and then sort of trickle. We're going to have change orders in the millions, I've worked with soils that were much better than this, and we would be in the dirt and we would have a 250K day. Like, oops, we hit a seam and it was 250K. Just like that, right? I'm just saying this is going to be much, much worse. And one other point, now I'll take questions, is that if you look at Pennsylvania, you walk around, like, we're not Chicago. If you go to Chicago, there are no forests, there are no hills, there are no trees. A developer will go and take it block by block and develop every single acre of land. Pennsylvania is not like that. And there's two reasons, the red bed and the slopes, okay? That's why we're lucky, because we don't have to sit there and live in that kind of cramped. We're used to it, we don't even know why. But the reason why is it's cost prohibitive to develop those hills, or else we would be living in Chicago. So, anyway, you had a question, sir?
Yeah, why don't you focus on replacing your school board?
Well, I wrote Bill into running because I totally agree, but I actually feel like it's too late for that, because I do think we have to focus.
It's never too late to stop.
If we get one in, I think that would be helpful, but I think it's actually, unfortunately, it's Lee Township now, where they have to be the adults in the room. Because it is all science and it's technical. It's not political. I'm an independent. This has nothing to do with politics. This is all, it's economics, it's solvency, and it's science, so.
Now, we had a real-world issue with this red bed clay along Route 65 in Kilbuck. Could you just tell everybody what happened there?
I read the report, and the summary is they blasted the day before, and I believe there was a water line where they put a water line in on a seam, but then they blasted, and the next day I think it all came down.
Well, yeah, the issue was, and I'm sure most of you remember this red bed clay, literally, I think there was an issue, they were doing prep site work, and we had a lot of rain during that period.
Right.
And what happened was that the whole hillside caved in and covered Route 65 and covered the railroad tracks. And Walmart or Sam's Club walked away from the project, and the remediation work.
Still in the millions.
The remediation work literally went on for 2 or 3 years after they closed the site. And if you go there now, you can see exactly what the site looks like, and it was a real mess. But
Yep. And one other point I'm going to make is, if anybody lives on that Leesdale hillside, their lives are actually in danger. If you blast red bed clay, those people cannot be downhill. They just can't during construction, during blasting. It's almost like a government taking. If you actually saw this GER report and you lived on a hillside and it got out, you would not be able to sell your property. Okay? If they want to do this, and they want to, let's say, let's balance the site let's say we spend the $105 million on the insurance, those people still are not safe downhill. I believe they have to purchase all 25 homes or some variation of that to make that truly safe. There was nobody downhill at Killbuck. Luckily, there were no cars. These people live there, and they're going to be blasting? I mean, it's preposterous.
Hey, Lynn?
Yeah, so.
The research that I've done, this red clay is very similar to like avalanche conditions in the mountain where you get fresh snow on certain iced over snow. It's very unstable. Any little thing will send the whole bunch of it right down the hill. And that's what happened in Killbuck.
Yeah,
when you disturb it, it comes down just like an avalanche.
Yeah, in fact, the first two pages of the Michael Baker report actually talk about failed seams deep down. It's not just the surface layers. It sort of shears off. If there's any kind of like saturation where that clay absorbs water, they call it highly reactive. And there's a concept in engineering, and I'm gonna slaughter this for the engineers in the group, but there's whole classes on statics, okay? Statics is the opposite of dynamics. Statics is to make things not move, right? You have a soil that moves. You have a soil that reacts and absorbs water and almost liquefies. And that's what we're talking about. That's why that broker who sold us this piece of you-know-what land said, get pregnant on this site, quote unquote, early, because there's so many problems. There's no way once they find out that they will proceed. That's what he said. Our geotech said, you shouldn't even gift that. They should have gifted you the site, okay? That's the same guy that said, I can engineer anything. Well, so can I, okay, for an unlimited amount of money. But they don't ask the geotech, should we do it? They tell us, how do we do it? Because for the district, money is no object. Like your house equity. One more piece about the insurance. If you can't get a Chubb or a Marsh, or what's the firm you were talking about, Bill, for the insurance? Willis. If you can't get one of those three insurance carriers to insure this project, you're insuring it with your home equity, okay? That they're just helping themselves to your home equity. That's the truth. There's no way you should proceed with this project without getting an insurance policy from one of those three firms, or some other firm. It doesn't really matter which one you want to pick. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand you don't want to build up on top of the hill. Could you summarize what is your Plan B?
Yeah,
Which I
mean,
assume is what's up on the board there.
Yeah, Plan B is like they redevelop schools all day long, right? So you'll see reports that say there's a coal seam and there's water underneath. That building has been standing there for 250 years, right? Or how many years? 100 years, okay? What they do is they go and they gut these things. They don't look anything like what it's there now. The bones might be good, but you would be able to add program on the backside of that hill, okay? Now that Kim already discussed, this building is much smaller than they originally thought it was gonna be. I guess the student population is diminishing. Either way, I would recommend taking the existing building, gutting it, adding program on the backside of the hill. There was discussion about that you couldn't build in the floodplain, but that's a preposterous statement because this site has been levied out. What that means is they've built all around the site. It's like a bowl. Nobody wants a bowl, but what they did, okay, so what levied out means whenever it floods, there's a train track in Ohio Boulevard stops the water from coming upstream, right? But the district never went back and levied out the site. They never went back and changed the floodplain. It's not a passive exercise. You actually have to do something, right? Instead, they used it and told the citizens that this is a floodplain site. Meanwhile, Giant Eagle's built up. The site to the right of us is built up. It's whatever that S-mark, right? So the point is, we haven't actively changed the flood map, but that would take 6 to 9 to a year to do that. But instead, they've used it as a weapon against the taxpayer to justify what I call geoforming a mountaintop. Which, if you go down to the district, you're like, hey, can we get a new soccer goal for these kids? They're using 2 sticks and a bucket. Oh, no, we don't have money for that. But we're gonna throw $150 million into dirt. Like, this is dirt. This isn't gonna teach anybody anything. This soil, that property is worthless. It's worthless. You could go buy, if you took the 150, I'll get to you in a second, sir. You could buy Swickley Academy, and let's throw in a few more private schools with the $150 million it takes to fill that site up. That site is not worth the money that you're going to throw into it. They're just not looking at it that way because they won't quantify the risk. So, go ahead.
Excuse me, real quick, how much is the state funding of this project?
We don't get any state funding.
No state funding
We
for a
would
new
have been better
school?
off, yes, we would have been better off to get state funding because at least we would have had an adult in the room with the Department of Education. But we don't have them in the room, so it's a free-for-all. It's the junior varsity club playing developer, right? That's who's doing this, so.
One side note on that, they always planned to get state funding. It was called PlanCon, but there hasn't been any funding for that since like late 2018, 2019, which is probably why we're going for grants all across the state of Pennsylvania and federal government to try to get, we would have gotten about 20% of our project costs if PlanCon existed. And currently, you're not supposed to buy land with a,
It's just for the building.
it's for the building. You can do a little site work, but you're supposed to stay on your existing site as opposed to just run around and buy new stuff.
Right.
Okay, just one more point on that. If let's say Lee Township was successful and required the downhill insurance, right? You would stratify that, let's say it's 35 million. You would stratify that number, and part of that, and I don't know if you two agree with me, part of that sum would go into the Act 34 calculation, and guess what? Boom, referendum. They're willing to not provide insurance, not provide an access road, and not treat the soils in a proper manner, in a safe manner, all to avoid a referendum. That's what this is all about. They don't want you taxpayers, to have a say in what's going on that site. You're on a need-to-know basis. We'll tell you how much of your equity we're going to take out of your house later. That's what they're doing. And that really makes me mad. I just think that's why I went to the Auditor General. I think that's, I don't know what the term is, like breach of fiduciary, et cetera, but that's what they're doing. So they're backing into a number. So anyway.
Let me ask you this. I could never get it from the board. How many students do you graduate from high school right now?
Kim, do you know that?
The current high school has 584 people. A class could range anywhere from about 135 to about 165. They vary.
Is that what your graduating class is?
Let's say on a high side, it's about 165. 165 would be about a high side and we've had classes as low as 135.
And you're probably going to be diminishing as you keep building all these condos around Swickley and everything. They're not with children. And so that 165 or whatever it is going to be diminishing over the years too. Your community isn't growing, it's shrinking as far as with children.
I would say yes and no. There have been population studies in 2015, and we were supposed to remain stable. Like our school district should be around 2,100 when they were doing the population studies. But as you know, living in this community, when people get unhappy, they just leave. They go somewhere else. And what was a little bit fascinating was when I started studying what happened to 53 students after we reopened from COVID. Like, okay, I get it. There's 70 people who disappeared during COVID because they didn't want their kids to wear masks or whatever, and maybe they're happy wherever they may be. But 53 people disappeared and never came back. They went to Watermark. So that's kind of what people here do. They just choose something else. So we have children. They exist. And if you would go, and I'd be okay if they would ever interview, where'd you go? Like, when a child leaves and your family still lives here, there should be a person tasked at Quaker Valley saying, well, where'd you go? And if you had a valid reason, that's fine. Like, I'm a performing arts person and I want to go to downtown Pittsburgh. But if your answer is, something educationally related, maybe we need to address that. And, well, I had a child for my junior year who ended up going someplace because he was playing hockey, and not once did I get a phone call or email, and I still live in the district.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. When you used to go through the state you had to give them a 5-year, 10, and a 15-year plan projection before they would contribute to you with the school. And you guys are sidestepping all that.
Yes.
And you're assuming, your little group is assuming you're going to have on an average of so many children 5 years from now, 10 and 15 years from now. And you may be surprised and you're going to have to convert that so-called new high school into something.
Oh, they'd be fine with doing that.
Yeah.
Even if they planned it and had their little cabal of people, they'd be completely fine with that. Absolutely.
Bottom line, this is a vanity project.
Yeah, I don't believe it can be built, actually.
I don't think you got a fighting chance with that project going the way it is.
I'm concerned we're going to spend 30 million in and we're going to run out of money. You know, like that they're capable of doing that. Like there's people that want to be buried on that site. There's guys that he's going to die on the hill, right? He's going to put 30 million in. He's going to tell you, hey, we don't have enough revenue until 2035. Sorry, but we're already committed to the site. I mean, they're capable of doing that, absolutely.
Ma'am, I would like to know what was the driving force behind getting a new school in the first place? It seems to me it wasn't that long ago the school district wanted to buy some houses to put in a parking lot.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's been speculation that there's pockets being lined. I mean, it defies logic, to be honest with you. I mean, if you just read that GER report from Michael Baker, I don't mean to be self-promoting, you have to ask yourself, how did we get here? This is insane. But like I said, it's very telling that none of you all can get that report. And I've even talked to Harrisburg. The only way I can get that report out is if I'm subpoenaed. We have to be subpoenaed to give you the report, unless the district gives it to you. So you all are due a copy of that report, okay? And you all be like, okay, this thing's dead, but nobody else can see it. So you're just taking my word for it. One more point that's funny, because Kim Gatesman found on those 3 options, they forgot to remove the cut and fill numbers, okay? If the district knew, they didn't notice it. She's like Margaret Thatcher. She finds this stuff, it's all in her handbag. She found that because all I knew was the GR report was redacted. But one day she shows up and she's like, well, look at this report. It has this many million cubic yards. And I said, oh my goodness, they forgot. Chuck, what's his name? What's the guy that's holding? Charlie forgot and didn't see the legend. I'm sure Charlie's this close to getting fired because that's out of the bag. They did not want that to be out of the bag. So it's just interesting. Yeah.
You know, you mentioned how the school district doesn't know where these kids go. Well, they do know, unless they go to a private school, because the funding
Yes.
is sent to that school where they are now attending.
Yes.
So the district does know where they're at.
They're all for, them going to private school, but like Kim says, if they go to these nonprofits, they lose money.
Well, we don't actually send a lot of people to the charter schools. An average for the state of Pennsylvania is 8%. We send about 1%. So out of our budget, we spend $585,000 sending kids to charter school. And I'll let you know, I've talked to Scott Antline, the finance director, and during COVID, it went up to just a tad over $1 million. And they track that avidly. That number is very, very important because it's directly coming out of our budget to do educational things for our kids. Now, because of that and where we are, we normally didn't have many charter schools that people are like, yeah, I feel like sending my kid to Baden Academy, or I feel like, whatever. And that money passes. It doesn't pass to like a Watermark, which is a, kind of a sort of a private homeschooly thing. But if you were to get a charter school, which we now have, which is Provident, which services dyslexia students, if any of our children, and we now have a couple, that's $37,500 for a special education student to leave our district and go to a different school. If it's a regular education, it's $19,700. So you're trying to that's why we added that online, QV Online Academy. And for a while we had teachers who their job was to retrieve children who'd gone to like PA Cyber School and stuff like that. So that way while we use some of the online services, maybe it cost us $5,000 a kid instead of giving away $19,700. I briefly mentioned it. I mean, the teacher's contract expired June 30th. They've been working without a contract. There's recently been an article in the paper. Supposedly, from what I hear, they're like 98 yards apart on a 100-yard field. So who knows when that's happening.
Add to that. So I actually got into it with the, the director of finance for the district, because I said, you know, it's arbitrary that we have a 90-day period where there's no contract, but you're rushing this Act 34 meeting because you're going to lock in at 120. Now, they're saying that the school's going to cost 105, but Bill and some other people did some math, and actually they have cash reserves where they can actually go up to 120 and not go back to the public. There's no referendum that can use the cash, right? I believe they're delaying the negotiation of the teacher's contract because let's say they have 4.5% increase over what the current number is, but it goes to 6. If it goes to 6, it eats into the 105, okay? So they're rushing, that's where they're pushing it. They had an Act 34 meeting before they actually submitted a full set of plans to the township. They also have not pulled the borings with Allegheny County on that roadway. There's a reason why they're doing that. We've owned this site since 2017. They don't want you to know the answer, what it's going to cost to develop Camp Meeting Road. I talked to the county guy. He said, it quizzles me why they wouldn't submit for a permit. He goes, quote unquote, they have even submitted for a permit. $35 million hit for that. Insurance, they're just going to bypass the insurance if Lee lets them, but we're not going to let them. But the point is, they can't build this site, but they still believe that they can, but they don't want that teacher's contract eating into their 120. So that's why there's no teacher's contract. That's my take on it.
Well, the other thing is about the teacher's contract. They were promised things by our previous superintendent when they signed it. So they gave up half their raises, and but they would go back to where they should have been and start in, like, you go back. You wouldn't get paid all the raises you were owed. So every teacher in our district is given up about $10,000 to $12,000 a person. That's before benefits. So they were all planning on getting their raises, which they want a big one because they're supposed to get a raise on top of that raise. So if you look at that, which is our biggest budget item, it will eventually affect our debt servicing ratio. So say they get an extra $1 million, $2 million, who knows? Right now, as far as I'm concerned, our budget is an imaginary budget because until you have a teacher's contract, we don't know what we have left over for debt service. But the earliest, if I'm buying a home and I have land that I have to develop, I have to be able to afford the whole home, the site development, all of that. If you were to look at it that way versus the way they're doing it, 2 phases, we do the site, then we do the school, you cannot afford this till a minimum of 2027, 28, and any additional costs then push it another year and another year. And that's assuming, oh wait, I forgot. If there's a countywide reassessment, they've already stated our revenues are going to go down. If that, the lawsuit which mandates schools are going to be equal, we're not going to have rich and poor districts anymore, then financed on real estate taxes, if that were to go through and we did the state average of $19,000, where are we making up our extra $13,000 per kid to be stable?
The programs are going to be eliminated because there'll be nothing left. We'll be locked into this school in perpetuity. So, you know, that's just, yeah.
I got to kind of move this.
Okay.
Yeah, you've come across loud and clear that you do not want to build that project. What do you want to do? Do you want to proceed with Plan B, and what is the estimated cost?
Yes. You know, my contention is that you can't build on that. There is no Plan A. Plan B could be another site, or it could be redeveloping that existing school. And like I said, they do that all day long.
Isn't that Plan B?
Yeah, that's a schematic. It's a parking structure, first 2 floors. The reason why they're doing that is that they're trying to stay out of the floodplain, which I think you would levy out.
And what will it cost?
Oh, I don't have that number. Yeah. It's whatever number you want it to be. If you're adding program on the back, you could throw 50 million, you could do 60 million. The district has not pursued that option. Like I said, I could make up a number. I could back into a budget. If you told me you can throw 75 million at this project, then the variable is what are you getting for it? Right now, they value and engineered out, like, I'll give you an example. There's no swimming pool, there's no black box theater, there's no labs. All it is, we call it prison finishes. They have a CMU block site with what we call prison finishes because they valued and engineered out all of the amenities and the finishes that make it a high-end school. Why they do that? Same theme, avoid the referendum, okay? Start the construction, build the school, come back for a referendum. You know, the school district says, hey, I need another 25 million because look at this school. All it is cinder block and there's no carpet. And then they hold you hostage to go back for more money after you start construction. They're absolutely capable of doing that.
Hey, Lynn,
Yeah.
what's wrong with the Bouchard fields up there, the ball fields? What's wrong with that? I've never heard a...
All I heard was, I didn't live here at the time, but I heard there was some runoff, some drainage issues, and there were some wealthy people that lived by, and they threatened to sue, and I
The
think,
NIMBY.
I think it went away. But like I said, I don't have the details on that. Yeah.
If you look at, in this, the sketch that came from the 2010 of the school, that there really was a Plan B in 2010. It was actually Plan A. They cost out a bunch of this stuff. So if we extrapolated a size of about 170,000 square feet, which we don't even need that, and use the current cost to do that, the school alone's going to be similar to what's on top of the hill, but a little cheaper just because it's a two-story building. So if they're at 72, you can do it, you know, around 65, 72-ish, that kind of stuff. And then you're like put another $5 million into site work, and then you still have some extra to decide, do we want a field house? Do we want something, you know, obviously we need a parking garage, you got to add that stuff. So it can be done. It was cost out in 2010. It was even, I think, updated in 2014, but you need...
Yeah, I just want to add something. So I do real estate for a living, and we have this thing called benchmark budgeting, right? You do what you can afford. So you figure out what you can afford, and then you apply it to what you have, right? And so just like the district did, their benchmark is they don't want to hit a referendum, so they have an arbitrary number out there. What they did, everything's a variable, right? The size of the school's a variable, the amenities are a variable, the finishes are a variable, right? What's not a variable? Making the site safe. The site cost is not a variable. You can't be like, oops, I had a rounding error and the site just came down and decimated 25 homes. That's their problem, right? But it's called squishy numbers. Everything is sort of like disappears and comes back, and you can't pin them down on anything because everything's a variable, right? Well, if you went down to the Beaver site, you said we can afford 65 million, then you designed the project for 65 million. But you don't keep going back and taking people's money, they can't afford it. Because we got a lot of people, I don't know if you all have been through all the neighborhoods around here, but I'd say 3/4, well, no, that's pretty high. I'd say half of them are poverty level areas. These people, they cannot afford unlimited school taxes. They're fixed income people. And I just feel like, you know, the district, it's like, it isn't just all education. You have to pave the roads, you have to take care of your homes, you have to eat. And you can't keep coming back at these people with unlimited amount of revenue. Like, they look at us as revenue. We're revenue generators. You don't have access to all of my home equity. I'm sorry.
Liars can figure and figures can lie.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Kim, Lynn, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Lunch today at